death toll continues to climb. More than 2,100 people are now confirmed dead after the country was hit by a 6.8 magnitude quake, the strongest in more than 120 years. Both Spain and the UK have sent search and rescue teams to help, as other international aid is also being pledged.
Near the quake's epicenter in the Atlas Mountains, scenes of destruction and devastation, with homes in small villages reduced to piles of rubble. Many people have spent another night outside. Now the frustration and desperation is building, especially in some of the hard-hit and remote areas.
Some just truly devastating scenes coming out of Morocco. They were hit with a 6.8 magnitude earthquake, which shook the country and claimed the lives of thousands, and that number is expected to continue to rise as rescue efforts continue. Now, more than 300,000 people have been affected in Marrakech and surrounding areas, according to the WHO. Now, according to US Geological Survey, earthquakes of this size in the region are very uncommon, but not completely unexpected. It noted that 9 earthquakes with a magnitude of 5 or higher have hit the area since the year 1900, but none of them have had a magnitude higher than 6. Just a reminder, this one was a 6.8, and CNN did some excellent reporting on this, so let's turn to this from them. The quake is the strongest to hit the nation's center in more than a century, and its epicenter was not far from popular tourist and economic hub Marrakech. At least 2,497 people have been killed in the disaster, and 2,476 have been injured, state media said on Monday. And as I mentioned earlier, the death toll is expected to rise, not just as they unbury bodies from the rubble and continue to count the currently dead, but because the housing in the area is not built to withstand earthquakes. So buildings that have been damaged by the earthquake are expected to continue to collapse, which is expected to take the lives of more Moroccans. Hopefully, and we'll get into this in a minute, the efforts to rescue and the efforts, the humanitarian aid can help mitigate those numbers, but we don't have a perfect picture right now of just how devastating this tragedy is going to be. Now, of course, as is so often the case when we see these horrific tragedies, that the poorest people in the country are expected to be affected the worst. From the Washington Post, the worst hit provinces are among the poorest in Morocco, with some homes lacking electricity or running water, even in better times. Rural Moroccans have struggled in recent years to recover from the economic shock of the pandemic, and more recently to cope with inflation and rising food prices. Now we have a map here so you can get an idea of just how large this affected area is, with the epicenter in the dark red in the center being impacted the worst, and as you go out, less and less impact. Not that it still isn't devastating for them. And just to paint a better picture of what it looks like in Morocco, we have this video of the earthquake. So you can see here the damage to the building structures. I mean, to some extent, just completely leveled homes, entire communities. And there's a search and rescue team, but many Moroccans had to dig their relatives and loved ones out of the rubble by hand, because there's so many affected areas that it's difficult for government assistance to even reach in the first place. Now, speaking of which, there has been international assistance offered, but Morocco has yet to accept aid from most of the countries offering assistance, including the United States. Offers of support have poured in from around the world, and specialized rescue crews across the European Union stood ready to deploy. An assessment team from the United States arrived Sunday to support the efforts of the Moroccan government, but by late Sunday, Moroccan authorities had accepted help from only a handful of countries. Now, the Moroccan government has, put into place, some plans to help rescue. They've started some missions to help rescue people and provide relief, and just more on that. Morocco has deployed its army to lead search and rescue efforts and has mobilized more than 1,000 doctors and 1,500 nurses. Aid groups have set up shelters for residents who lost their homes or who cannot return to them due to structural damage or fear of aftershocks, but there are still massive gaps, as I mentioned earlier, and where the government is able to reach and how much aid they're able to give to the massive number of people who have been impacted by this. So communities near the epicenter of Morocco's powerful earthquake were a picture of devastation and anger Sunday, as residents described using their bare hands to pull loved ones from the rubble. In most places, there was no sign of government promised rescue teams, and there was no word yet from many villages higher up in the mountains. And just on that, I was reading this morning that so much of, and it's sad to see, the ways in which, of course there's limitations just based on where some of the residents impacted are living and the ability of the Moroccan government to reach them. But I mean, Senator Turner, it was devastating reading about how, it says something about the resiliency of the human spirit, but it was so sad to read that people whose houses were only half destroyed, were taking in the people whose houses were completely destroyed and sharing all that they had. And these communities have really come together to help one another, and that's wonderful. But it's also quite sad because it's happening in the wake of the government not providing enough assistance for those people that they have to fill in those gaps.
Yeah, right. I mean, this is a harsh example of why government does matter. And barring something that I'm missing about why the Moroccan government is slow to accept aid from other countries, it's the height of irresponsibility for them not to, because of the magnitude of this devastation, the kind of situation that we're dealing with. All politics should be put aside if that's one of the rationales for the Moroccan government to decide whose aid they're gonna accept and whose they're not. People are literally dying. People have already died. People are fighting for their lives. And you, at this moment, accept the help. Again, and Ray, I wanna qualify that by saying, if I'm missing something, then I wanna know. But other than that, accept the help. Condolences out to the people who have lost their loved ones during this natural disaster. This can happen anywhere at any time to anybody, which leads to the question, Ray, what is government doing in the meantime, in between time, knowing that these structures, you laid out, and big ups again to CNN for their reporting and so many others that are reporting very deeply on this. What are countries doing in the meantime, in between time, to shore up infrastructure? We all know, even right here in the United States of America, we have infrastructure failings as well. Are we gonna just simply wait for a natural disaster to happen to say, whoops, we should have worked on that 20 years ago, or in this case, 120 years ago. It's been 120 years, according to the reporting, since a earthquake of this magnitude has hit that country. What is government waiting on? One of the things that can be done to help people who suffer disproportionately, and even those who don't, is to shore up a nation's and cities, by that, by extension, infrastructure.
That is such an excellent point, because it reminds me of, and there was a lot of comparison in the articles between what happened in Turkey and now the earthquake in Morocco. And when we saw the devastation in Turkey, they had tens of thousands of people die. You look at who was dying, it was the poor people in Turkey, it was the Kurdish people in Turkey who have had their infrastructure routinely, undermined by the government. These are the poor areas that don't have the same, well-built infrastructure. So the buildings collapsed more easily than they otherwise would have. So, it's such an important question to ask, why are we waiting until we are counting the thousands of dead bodies and not doing something in the meantime? And even here in the United States, even in states like California, one wildfire away from a huge death toll. In states like Texas, one down power line, one blown transformer away from elderly people freezing to deaths in their own home. It's a nightmare. And just to bring climate change into this as well, we're gonna see more and more of these disasters. And if we're not seeing the same, robust action to meet that, on the one hand, to mitigate the effects of climate change, but also to bolster our infrastructure, we're just gonna be counting the dead more and more as time goes on. And I'll let you get the last word on this, Senator.
Well, that's exactly right. Ray, and there's really no excuse for this in the 21st century. We have more technology, more knowledge, more even understanding of the pattern of natural disasters that we, in your words, we can start to mitigate some things. And infrastructure, having strong infrastructure in any nation is one of the best social contract activities that government can do. We can't shore up infrastructure as individuals, we shore up infrastructure as a group, as a people, as a nation, whatever that nation is, whether it be Morocco or the United States of America or Canada. That's how you shore up infrastructure. So somebody or a group of somebody should be thinking about this all the time. And at what affects one directly affects us all indirectly. I'm taking that from MLK Jr., Reverend Doctor, but that is so true, Ray. So the people who are at the heart of the destruction and the disaster, it also has a ripple effect to other people, to other countries. So it is in all of our benefit, even if people don't want to do things for moral reasons, which I don't understand why they wouldn't. But there's some people that morality doesn't, doing something because it's the right thing to do doesn't even enter their mind. There is an economic and societal, a holistic societal benefit to ensuring that infrastructure is sound. And we know that this impacts tourism in that nation as well. That's economic. So we got to show up our people. And my last point, Ray, when you talked about or described how folks have to dig out their loved ones because government's react is slow. This is really a moment where it is going to take government intervention and also individual intervention, but individual intervention can only go so far. So I want to end my comments the way that I started. This is an absolute pristine example as to why robust government is necessary to be able to lift people out of situations that they cannot do as individuals. This is collective effort here.
Absolutely, and hopefully, we'll hear more in the next couple days about Morocco's accepting aid from more countries. Hopefully there'll be a more robust response to helping people get out of their homes, find temporary housing, eventually find permanent housing, and we'll keep all of you updated on that as we go through the week.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.